Maybe you learned early on not to ask for too much because you didn't want to be a burden. Or maybe you felt like you had to hold on super tightly to love because it didn't always feel consistent. And here's what I want you to understand, my friend. Your younger self adapted to that. Your younger self learned and learned brilliantly. Hi, my friend. Welcome to the Bounce Back Black Woman podcast. I'm Dell, and I've overcome some of the most devastating heartbreaks I could ever have imagined. Do you find yourself stuck in sadness after a broken heart, asking God, why me? Well, I'm here to help women just like you heal and build the resilience to overcome life's greatest hurts. If you long for joy and confidence again, this podcast is for you. So grab your headphones and those heartbreaks. Let's talk. Hey there, my friend, and welcome back to Bounce Back Black Woman. We've been having some real conversations in the last few episodes about heartbreak in all of its different forms. And those conversations matter because our healing matters. But today I want to shift us just a little bit because at some point it's not just about going over what happened to you and working toward healing blindly. At some point, it becomes as much about understanding who you became in response to whatever happened to you, whatever your heartbreak was, and whatever it is that's got you feeling stuck. And that is where self-awareness comes in. Because if you've ever found yourself asking, why do I keep showing up this way in relationships? Or maybe, why do I keep showing up this way in relationship after relationship after relationship? Today's episode might just give you some answers. Because we're going to talk about something that explains a lot about the way that we love, how we connect with others, and how we respond when things can feel a little uncertain. Today we're talking about attachment styles. And while I'm sure many of you have heard the term and understand what it means, don't worry, I'm not going to get all clinical on you. We're going to keep this one real and simple, but also practical. Your attachment style is basically how you connect, how you respond, and how you feel when you're in relationships with others. But it's not just how you love when things are going well. It's how you respond when love feels uncertain. It's how you react when communication shifts in that relationship, when someone pulls back, when you don't quite feel secure. And the truth is, most of these patterns were formed long before you ever started dating or entered a relationship with that person. So let's start with understanding where it actually comes from. For many of us, our attachment style started early, in childhood, as a matter of fact, in the way that love was shown to us, or the way that love was not shown, in whether we felt emotionally safe or not, or if we had to figure things out on our own. Maybe you had a parent who loved you very, very deeply, but they weren't always emotionally available. Maybe things felt good until they didn't. Maybe you learned early on not to ask for too much because you didn't want to be a burden. Or maybe you felt like you had to hold on super tightly to love because it didn't always feel consistent. And here's what I want you to understand, my friend. Your younger self adapted to that. Your younger self learned and learned brilliantly. You see, you learned how to protect yourself. You learned how to stay connected. Or you learned how to keep your peace based on whatever felt safest at that time. And so your attachment style is not a flaw. It's not a weakness. It's actually an adaptation. Now, before I break down the different styles, I want to say something really, really important. Most of us are not just one thing. We can't boil it down to one simple attachment style across all of our relationships, across all of our years, and all of our stages in life. Now, you might hear parts of yourself in more than one of these, depending on the relationship, depending on the season of your life, depending on how safe you feel. But usually, almost always, there is one pattern that shows up more consistently than the others, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. And that's what we're paying attention to today. Let's start with anxious attachment. This is often somebody who values connection very deeply. She's emotionally aware. She loves with presence, with intention, with depth. But at her core, there's often this fear of, will I be left? And so when things feel uncertain, you might notice overthinking, wanting reassurance, feeling unsettled when communication changes. And that could be communication style, communication frequency, or even communication tone. And internally, it can feel like your mind just won't rest. It won't stop overthinking until the connection feels secure again. And this isn't because you're too much. It's because somewhere along the way, consistency didn't always feel like a guarantee. Now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about avoidant attachment. And I want to say this clearly. Avoidant does not mean that you don't care. It doesn't mean that you're broken, because somehow in society we've begun to label avoidance as broken, and that's not true. In fact, many avoidant women in particular care very deeply, but they've learned that I feel safer when I rely on myself. And so they may value independence. They might take longer to open up. And they might need space to process emotions. And when things feel too intense or too close or too scary, they don't lean in. They lean back. And at the core, there's often this fear of, will I lose myself or lose control of myself if I get too close? And on the inside, that can feel like I just need space to breathe, like they're being smothered. And it's not because they don't feel, it's because closeness can feel overwhelming. Now, the attachment style that gets the least amount of attention and the least amount of publicity, but it is a real attachment style, and that is disorganized attachment. And you may hear it referred to as fearful-avoidant. That's the one I don't want to leave out, because for some of you, this might be the one that hits closest to home. I mentioned at the start of this section that it's often called disorganized attachment and referred to as fearful-avoidant. And it's those words that can start to feel confusing, because it really describes the person who both wants closeness and fears it at the very same time. And so internally, it can feel like, come here, but don't get too close. Or, I want love, but I don't fully trust it. And it's that internal push and pull that can happen within you, not just inside of the relationship itself. So how does this usually look when it comes to a relationship? It might look like feeling deeply connected one moment and then suddenly feeling the urge to pull away the next. Struggling to fully trust what it is that you're feeling, so you push those feelings down. Or feeling overwhelmed by how much or how deeply you feel. And it can feel like you don't quite know which version of you is even going to show up from moment to moment. This style is often rooted in past experiences, where love felt both present and unsafe. And I'm talking about situations where there may have been inconsistency or emotional unpredictability, or even a little bit of fear mixed into the connection that you had with someone else. So your nervous system learned, I want connection, but I also need to protect myself from it. Now, if you're listening and you're thinking, wow, that sounds like me, and I don't like that, I want to gently remind you that there is nothing wrong with you. And if you're thinking that sounds like someone that I know or love, I want to remind you that there's nothing wrong with them. Because this isn't instability. This is the human system trying to make sense of something that once didn't feel safe. And then the next type of attachment is secure attachment. And I want to be clear. Secure attachment does not mean perfection. So let's not put it up on a pedestal. It's not someone who never ever gets triggered. It just means someone who has learned how to stay present inside of their connection with others and communicate their needs without fear or without holding back. And it often is someone who doesn't let fear drive the relationship. At its core, secure attachment says, I can be close to you and still be okay within myself. And my friend, there is a steadiness there, a groundedness. And for many of us, that is something that we have to grow into. So as you're listening, you might hear yourself in more than one of these, and that is okay. And it's actually pretty normal, because the question isn't, which one am I always and forever? The real question is, which one of these shows up when I don't feel safe? I want to repeat that, because that's what you need to anchor to. Which one of these shows up when I don't feel safe inside of a relationship? And again, this is why self-awareness matters, my friend. Because when you understand what's happening inside of you, what's going on in your mind and your heart and your nervous system, you can then begin to choose to respond differently rather than just simply reacting. And if this is something that you want to go deeper into, there's a couple of really good books on this topic. And these books have helped me over the years. The first one is called Attached. I'll link it in the show notes. And the second one, which I'll also link in the show notes, is called No More Anxious Attachment. So check them out if you want to learn a little bit more about attachment styles. We're going to talk about them a little bit deeper in the next episode. But for now, I want to shift us to a self-reflection moment. And I want you to think about this for a second. Think back to your last relationship. Maybe that's the one you're in now. I want you to think about a time when things felt uncertain, or maybe when communication shifted, when you didn't quite know where you stood or what the relationship was heading toward. And ask yourself this question. At that time, did you lean in and seek closeness, or did you pull back and create distance? There's no judgment in that question or the answer, my friend. just awareness, because we're learning how to be more self-aware. And if I'm honest, I've seen myself in more than one of these. There were times in my life where I showed up anxious. I needed and wanted reassurance, and I was trying to hold on tightly to something that I simply didn't want to lose. And then there were other times where I felt myself pulling back, and I told myself, I can do this by myself. I don't need anything from anyone. Same woman, different responses. And it's then that I started to realize that this wasn't just about the other person. It was about what felt safe to me at the time. Now, our standard question, why does it hurt so much? And here's the part that hits when it comes to talking about and learning about attachment styles. When you don't understand your attachment style, you can start to believe that something is wrong with you. And that hurts. Or you can blame the other person, and that hurts. Or you can find yourself repeating the same patterns over and over again. And even that, my friend, hurts. Not because you're broken, but because you're operating from something that you've not taken the time to examine. And my friend, what you don't understand, you will repeat. And this is where I bring it back to faith, because God is not an author of confusion. He's not asking you to stay stuck in cycles that just keep hurting you over and over again. Self-awareness is not about judgment, my friend. It's about invitation. An invitation to heal, an invitation to grow, and an invitation to learn how to love differently. So here's your journal prompt that I want you to sit with. Which attachment style shows up for me the most when I don't feel safe? And the second part, and what might that be protecting me from? That one's going to get you. My friend, this is just the beginning of this conversation, because in the next episode, we're going to talk about what happens when different attachment styles start interacting within a relationship. And that is a whole conversation by itself. So if this episode spoke to you, I want you to share it with another woman who needs it, or another friend. I say woman because that's who I talk to, but I know that there are men who listen to this podcast and get a lot from it. So share it with someone who needs it. And as always, I want you to remember this, my friend. You're not broken. You're learning. You're evolving, and you're bouncing back. And it's not just you. It's not just me. It's us. Well, that's it for today, my friend. I really hope this episode inspired, encouraged, or just plain comforted you. If so, please share it with a friend who might be struggling in her own healing journey. And if you take a moment to leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts, you'll help other women find encouragement through their heartbreak. Remember that God is holding your hand along this journey. And guess what? I'm holding the other. Life is short, so bounce back, Black woman.